to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
It's quite plain, sir, that Herr Hitler could not admit defeat in his air attack on Great Britain without sustaining most serious...
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the empire of
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of the Weekly Debrief. This is a podcast that my buddy Lane and I just started, and this is our very first episode. Even though I'm in a hotel room right now, Lane's at his house. We thought that this would be probably like a good traveling podcast just because Lane and I both travel so much. But at the same time, we wanted to do this podcast. This was actually Lane's idea, and I actually love it. So this is our first episode of the Weekly Debrief. And Lane, before we get into who we are, you want to tell them a little bit about the podcast first?
Yeah. I think it was, I got married last year and we were all at my wedding, and I saw you discussing some topics with some of my friends and family. And I noticed, I was just watching you, and you had this very calmness about you, despite discussing a super emotional and emotionally charged current societal topic. And it clicked. I was like, man, Kawa has a unique ability to stay calm while being very convicted in his opinion and his position in a topic, if you will, subject matter. And it just made me realize that, like, I like discussing contentious topics, probably to get more emotional or animated before you will. But nonetheless, I was like, that'd be a great idea, a great podcast of two people who like to discuss super sensitive topics by today's societal standards. And hopefully we could share our, I thought, like, hey, I think we should be able to share our opinions, talk about contentious topics, and hopefully present them in a way where not a lot of emotional and rage or anger is tied to our opinions, and hopefully can be received or not received. And our viewership can kind of, hopefully our podcast can be a conduit to exchange ideas and difference of opinions of popular topics or unpopular topics nonetheless. And obviously, I'm sure our military background and our different upbringings and cultural ethnic differences of the two of us can kind of sift out or bring out the beauty of, our country and the world at large, if you will.
Well, I think that was very well put, Lane. And just from my followers that are here, let me translate that. Basically, we're just going to talk a lot of shit on our government, and and we're going to discuss a lot of societal issues here in America that we like or don't like. And what's great about doing this with Lane is that we're going to have two different point of views on this, which makes a very good kind of debate, or at least a discussion, with the exchange of ideas that Lane was talking about, but also just to share some different perspectives and give some differences of opinion, because that's how we broaden our understanding of anything. But not just societal issues, but we're going to talk about foreign policy. We're going to talk about domestic policy. We're going to talk about our politics in general. Obviously, there's a lot of hot topics going on right now in the news. I feel like every day something new is popping up. So this is a good time to start this podcast and give you guys some insight from two military guys that have a vast amount of military experience, but also just personal experiences that might give them, obviously bring us to different kind of conclusive thoughts of opinion when it comes to certain topics. And that's why I said yes to doing this with Lane, because I don't want to be in a podcast with an echo chamber. I want somebody to challenge me just like I can challenge them. And this is why I think this podcast is going to work, and why I feel like you guys are not going to be bored. But also, I think some of you guys will start taking sides, which is great because it will start debate. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot of shit about our government and the shit that, we want to bring to light, or at least advocate for. Because if it's one thing that Lane and I agree on, it's that every American here in America comes first, and our rights and our civil liberties and everything comes first. and then we kind of, we can kind of build branches off that foundation, that common ground, and then maybe, bring in some different ideas on topics. And then, of course, foreign policy, because Lane has a lot of time in the Middle East. I have a lot of time in the Middle East. I also have a good understanding on the intelligence side of things, with geopolitics and foreign affairs, that I can give you guys insight on for what's going on overseas, not just obviously in the Middle East, but things that involve Iran and Russia and China, perhaps. And Lane has a lot of input there as well. So that's what the podcast is about. So we hope to kind of go big with this. Eventually, we'll bring on guests, but for the time being, it's just you guys get Lane and I. You're stuck with us. Um, Lane, you and I go back pretty far, bro. You want to kind of start our story, and I'll pick up somewhere.
Yeah, I think going on 20 years would be the short and simple answer. I think um, the more in depth answer is that we met each other at a time in our lives where you were aspiring to be a Green Beret. I had reluctantly been reassigned to a unit. I was coming from Italy, which is, the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and I was being assigned to the 3rd ID, 2nd Brigade, Fort Stewart. And at that time, in my we call it immaturity, I did not want to be there. I was going from this airborne community that I had a lot of pride in, and I was being assigned to this platoon that you rode in a bunch of Bradleys. And however, with that, that unit had a lot of fame for its Thunder Run on the initial invasion of Iraq. So I think that's where we met. And then through the years, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, is there were a lot of events that led to you and I losing touch over the years, be it you pursuing being a Green Beret, which inherently has a super busy schedule, and me running away from some of the experiences that I had in the 3rd ID. And then just periodically and routinely touching base with each other through the years. And then probably over the last 3 years or 4 years, we've gotten kind of reconnected and we haven't missed a beat, if you will. So I think that's that kind of my perspective on it, and I'd be interested to hear yours.
Well, I mean, yeah, you and I go way back to when I first came into the Army. And that's where we met. So when I left the Marine Corps, I went into the Army to try out for Special Forces. But in the meantime, I had to be somewhere that wasn't Special Forces, right? So I went to Fort Stewart, 3rd ID, and I got there. It's a mechanized unit. I'm an infantry guy, so what do I know about being mounted on these, these big ass vehicles and Bradleys and stuff? So I kind of was like, whatever, this place is just a temporary place for me, a transient spot. So when I got there, I met a couple other dudes that just got there from other units. In this case, I met Lane that got there from the 173rd in Vicenza, Italy, which is a prestigious unit, a LURS unit. Lane, you want to tell them about LURS really quick, what that stands for?
Yeah, long range surveillance detachment.
And so we don't have to get into that with or what Lurst was and what he did in this episode, but that's just where he came from. And just so you know, the Army Bubbas will know that he came from a really good unit, and I came from a really good unit in the Marine Corps. And so when we first met each other, we kind of butted heads, and I think maybe that was just a couple A types that felt the same about the place they just got to. So we didn't get along at first, is what I'm trying to say, but eventually we hit it off, and then once we did, we were just kind of attached to the hip. We became friends with a bunch of people there, Lane. I mean, we had at least 10 people that I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the component of that was mostly personal time outside of work. Married couples, dating couples, and then a bunch of single individuals, a bunch of NCOs, young NCOs that kind of gravitated towards each other socially outside of work, and then that kind of set the frame, the foundation of a relationship that grew professionally.
Yeah, and then the reason I'm kind of staying in this little phase right now, guys, is because this is like, I've been in the military over 20 years. Lane has been in the military 20 years, and I've been in a lot of places. Fort Stewart, that little transient time that I spent there trying to go to SF at Fort Bragg, in those 3 months, 4 months, I've never gotten so close to people in the military as I did in that 4 months at Fort Stewart with, guys like Lane, but most of those guys were mechanized. They belonged to Third ID. They knew what they were doing there, and so it's kind of crazy how we all came along and got so close. And the reason I'm harping on it is because when these guys now got locked into a deployment in Iraq, and I was getting ready to go to selection, and so as Lane and these guys left, I had maybe a couple weeks before I had to leave for selection, and that's where Lane and I said goodbye, and a bunch of us said goodbye, and they were actually trying to lock me in to go to that deployment. Remember that, Lane?
Yeah. Who wants to be a Green Beret? Come to this deployment in the Third ID with us.
Yeah. Don't be a Green Beret. Come be a. I was like, I could have stayed in the military. I could have stayed in the Marine Corps if I just wanted to deploy to Iraq, bro.
Absolutely.
But the leadership was not on my side. Let me just tell you that much. And so but that's where we said goodbye. But I had to say goodbye to a lot of people. And what I didn't realize is that when I said goodbye to some of these guys, it would be the last time I said goodbye to them, because a lot of them didn't come back home. And that was like hard on me, but I couldn't imagine how hard that was on Lane, because he was there. He saw it all. I was at, now the Q course trying to become a Green Beret. He's out there fighting bad guys on a daily and losing our brothers. And so, Lane, I don't know if I ever told you this, man, but like, you and I kind of lost connection there, and I lost connection with a lot of those Third ID Fort Stewart guys. Not just because I was busy in the Q course, but I had like this overwhelming sense of guilt for not going on this deployment. Because I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I did think about it. I did think about, well, what if I just knock out this deployment with these guys and then come back and then go to selection? Because that was an option I had. But I chose the route that I did, and then things happened, and we lost friends. I'll just say that much. We lost quite a few friends, and because of that, I felt guilty, and so I stopped kind of reaching out to people because I didn't quite know how to talk to guys. And this wasn't the first time I lost friends, but this was the first time I lost friends and brothers, on a deployment that I wasn't on, and so it was different. But I lost touch with Lane, and we had stopped talking for I don't know how many years, Lane, before we reconnected.
I know after that deployment, I came, a friend of our, Greg, and I drove up to do, I think you were putting on a birthday party for your son, birthday party, excuse me. And I think you were at the Bravo course at this time, preparing to go to Robin Sage or whatnot. Yeah. And then from that point, I was going to be PCSing. Greg was getting out of the Army. And I think that was kind of the juncture in which maybe we lost touch for multiple years.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I pretty much graduated and went to fifth group, I think. Or no, this was after I got to, was it Campbell? I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Or Bragg.
I think it's when you got to Campbell, because when we visited you, you were in the middle of the Q course. So I just think when you got to Campbell, if I recall correctly, you went to an ODA, and I think y'all were pretty much getting ready at that point.
Get ready to deploy. Yeah. Okay. And then that was it. So that was like 2007, I think, 2006, something like that. Now that we've kind of reconnected, obviously we are the best of friends. In fact, Lane is getting ready to move to Texas. And so he's going to be closer to me. I'm in Houston, and he'll be like somewhere in the Austin area or just outside of it. And we'll get to see each other a lot more. Hopefully we get to bring this podcast to you guys in a studio at some point, and make it look all nice and professional. But for right now, we're just a couple of traveling podcasters, Lane. So that's what it comes down to.
And I think it'll always be interesting. You see some of those podcasts out there, the first 10 episodes, it looks probably exactly like ours looks right now, if not better. And then you fast forward 20 to 30 episodes, and you kind of start noticing the transformation and the evolution of the editing gets a little bit better. The backgrounds are better, things like that. Full transparency, I think this is our third attempt at doing this as we navigate the software and podcast tech, if you will, and which is weird because I think you and I are pretty up to date on technology and things like that for people our age. So hopefully this time it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're gonna obviously we're doing it organically now, so I think we're good. Our setup is good for now, but I'm excited to see where it goes, and especially when we get co-located and then start recording stuff in studio. Um, so that's really about it. Now now we're here, guys, and like this podcast now. This is probably a good place to kind of segue into a couple of topics, don't you think, Lane?
Yeah,
I
I
think we
think
kind of
start navigating some topics of interest that I think you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, the first one that I really want to talk about, and we don't have to talk about it for long, is HR1, Trump's big beautiful bill
It's
that
it's big,
is
guys. It's really big.
that's just stuffed and stuffed with a bunch of legislation, everything from big stuff like like building an iron dome or well, hold on, golden dome
Golden.
uh, over the entire U.S. Which, if you guys don't know what the Golden Dome is, just Google the Iron Dome and you'll see what Israel has. And then he's trying to do that in the U.S. But also, he's trying to entice Canada to becoming the 51st state. And if they do, then we'll protect them with our Golden Dome as well. We'll extend that force field over their borders. They'll become the 51st state. And according to news articles today, Trump or Canada is actually considering it. So I don't know how much of that is true, but we'll see. But specifically in that bill, there is Section 2. Section 2 is the Hearing Protection Act. And why this matters to me, and all of it, of course, matters, but where this matters down to the ground level is that people who exercise their Second Amendment and shoot rifles and pistols uh, can now shoot your rifles and pistols suppressed without having to register them under the NFA, and they are taken off the NFA items list. However, we're not there yet because the bill, that Section 2 passed at the House. Well, that whole big beautiful bill kind of passed at the House, didn't it, Lane?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then
That's the
now we got
House,
to
and
get
it's
to the
pending in the
Senate.
Senate.
So we got to get to the Senate. But what they're trying to do, so this is a huge win for us, by the way. For the House to approve for suppressors to come off the NFA is amazing, guys. We want this, right? But now it has to go to the Senate. And what they're trying to do before the Senate votes on it is that they're also trying to put SBRs in there, which is short barrel rifles. Anything under a 14.5-inch barrel is an SBR, which means it becomes an NFA item and you have to register it. So if the Senate passes this, then that means that you guys can buy NFAs like you can buy guns. That means you can buy SBRs like you can buy an AR or a rifle, which is 14.5. This is going to change a lot of things. This is good for the Second Amendment. This is good for people who shoot. Shooting with suppressors obviously is really good for your ears. I mean, you don't have to wear ear pro and like you won't have tinnitus like Lane and I have. Um, but there's a different side of it. People who want gun control look at it in a different way. And I don't know, Lane, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so I think I have to provide a premise of my comments here so that you're following, given the fact that you have a following and I do not. Uh, don't does not take my comments on this lead in the wrong direction. I am a pro Second Amendment American, if you will. Now, with that being said, as you read this out or kind of went over this, um, I am typically probably going to be the person on this podcast that's somewhere in the center, which is the easiest place to be because sometimes it almost appears that you stand for nothing. You just critique everything. And I fully acknowledge that. So I fully expect to get some feedback from the viewership on that guy's got a rubber spine, if you will. However, I digress. The Hearing Protection Act. I think if you were to ask Pro 2 Alpha or Second Amendment people, you'd get a very in-depth, well-explained thought on why suppressors should be accessible and they should be banned. It's stupid or it's pointless. You would have people in the middle, probably half aware. Took a shooting class, maybe hasn't touched a gun, maybe. They would probably say like, why does the average American need a suppressor or silencer? And then the people on the other side would say, just absolutely not. It has nothing to do with self-defense and you can defend yourself other ways, right? So I think those are probably your main three categories of people or demographics that would comment or have an opinion on this.
Right.
I find it entertaining, if that's the right word, to see it called the Hearing Protection Act, because that clearly is crafted from someone who's a pro Second Amendment person who's going to say it's only to protect hearing. And as you kind of went over the the SB, the short barrel aspect, I say this laughing, Kawa, so don't take it as I'm trying to be lighthearted here, but is that supposed to protect hearing too? And that's where I think the reason I pose that is that I think that the tribalism maybe of politics is where you want to get suppressors off the NFA list. Okay, got it. But we're going to call it the Hearing Protection Act. The reason to get suppressors is because of hearing. Okay, and then we're going to get SBCs or whatever on there, or
SBRs, but I mean, they're
SBRs. Sorry,
trying. That doesn't mean
they're
they
trying,
will.
right?
Right.
But my point being is these bills, and not just bills specifically, all bills, typically address somewhere between 10 and 30% of what's actually titled, and then the other 70% is just a bunch of inflated other stuff in it that has nothing to do with what it's supposed to get after. So what I'll tell you is I'm pro Second Amendment. I'm not against suppressors. I can see the benefit for someone like yourself who shoots roughly 1,000 rounds plus, or multiple thousand rounds a quarter of the year through your work, your training, and the classes and the work you do. But coming from a person who's also shot guns for a long time, probably less of the pistol game than you, but rifle game, I think I'm pretty good. I would argue that, or at least push back a little bit, that I have no issue with these suppressors, whatever, being sold to the populace. And we can maybe, I'll kick it to you, but I can maybe peel back the onion on the actual Constitution, the Second Amendment, what it was originally. Our founding fathers saw the need and importance for it, and how we've evolved. But maybe to get your feedback on my initial comments there, as I teeter the line of not having an opinion, a strong opinion on either
Center.
one. Yeah, pretty much in the middle.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good place to be, because that just means that it implies a couple of things: that you are looking at both sides objectively, and you are, willing to find some kind of common ground between the two sides, so we can kind of get to that, bipartisan place, right? It's you mentioned the founding fathers and the Constitution and how they wrote it. I just want to expand on that and say that I feel like our founding fathers wrote the Constitution brilliantly. I feel like they sat there, and as they were writing these amendments, they played out scenarios, maybe had meetings about scenarios, like what happens if the government has too much power? Well, this is why the Second Amendment makes sense. Okay, but what happens if the people take up arms and this become this mob mentality and cause chaos and become unruly, right? And laws go out the window. What happens if that? It's like, okay, so they probably played out these scenarios, but I feel like the way the Second Amendment is written is that it is written in a way that protects the law-abiding citizen, but also where they can't abuse the Second Amendment to commit crimes, because now there's crimes in place with guns specifically, but also it allows us to maintain arms, or the right to bear arms, in case the government gets to a place where it becomes tyrannical. And I know that's a cliche kind of thing to say, but a tyrannical government doesn't mean what's happening in the US now, but it does mean that one day, there could be a police state in this country. There could be martial law declared. There could be something that authorizes the government to now kind of bypass the Constitution in order to bring law and order to the community, right? Or for the safety of the community. So that means they could take your guns. That means they could apply curfews. That means they can make checkpoints for you and apply all these rules. And that's where we don't want to get to. But in case we do get to that place, we have a Second Amendment that protects our right to maintain or to bear and maintain arms in case we do have to fight, because otherwise, what are we? We're just sheep, and we're just kind of sitting ducks. So, and I am a constitutionalist. I am an absolutist when it comes to our Constitution, because our Constitution was written on principles. It wasn't written for scenarios. It wasn't written for what happens in 2025. It was written with principles that applied no matter the times, no matter the government in place, no matter what's happening in America. Those rights are there. And that's how I feel about it. But I get the other side. and that's why you're uh obviously like the other side of the coin, kind of, in a way, Lane, because you are center, so you'll obviously kind of bring some objectivity to what I'm talking about. But that's just where I'm at with it. um well, anyway, so I guess where it needs to go now is the Senate, and then we'll see if the Senate passes or not. But if they do, that's going to be amazing. No more tax stamps, no more registration. SBRs maybe get in there, maybe they don't. Not a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal because we want SBRs. Like, they shouldn't regulate what the barrel length should be on our guns, right? But who knows? Who knows?
Well, and Kyle, real quick, I would just add to, I push back a little bit, but I could also be the person where if someone says, "Hey, Lane, the importance of the Second Amendment," and I would distill it down to this, and I kind of share this with people when discussing the Second Amendment, is that the Second Amendment, when drafted, when you look back, when it was drafted to where we are now, I kind of always provide this example or scenario, if you will, is that there's two main variables or two main elements within that: is it's civilian populace, or the people, human behavior, and then the government. What I always offer people is, in 2025, from the day the Constitution was, ratified and everything, is that people have changed, our communities have changed, people have evolved. One thing I would offer, just to maybe spark some thought or put some mental rigor to, is our government has not. I don't think our government has changed that much, right? People would look at key points in history and say, well, what about World War One, two, slavery, segregate? Okay, yeah, those events happened. What was the government's reaction to all those events? Did they change through force, or did the government change through political influence, or influence to stay in power and things like that? So what I would offer to people is that today there is still a case to be made that there are governments across this world, throughout our world, that are borderline tyrannical. Furthermore, there are terrorist and rebel groups in other countries that don't have well-established government systems, that are corrupt and oppress. They're oppressing local populace, communities, tribes, and civilians. So, as much as I can, like I said, push back, I just thought the Hearing Protect Act was kind of funny, because it's clearly drafted by some Republicans, and if the liberals were to draft that bill, they would call it the secret tube where you could shoot from everywhere in the world, or no one will know where you're shooting from, act. So I can kind of provide both sides for it, but I will say the Second Amendment, being a pro Second Amendment person, that would kind of be my input on, as we evolve as a society. I would just offer people to check back, check your history and the research, and ask yourself, how much has the government changed? Its colors, the old saying, a zebra's stripes remain the same. So I'll kind of close with that on the topic, but that's just kind of, as you were talking about the Constitution or something, it's not lost on me that I could present a case that some things have changed and some have not.
Well, while you were talking and I was listening to you, I was just looking up who the author was of Section 2, to see, who in fact named it. But I couldn't find it. I was trying to do it in a hurry, but I'm sure if I dig a little bit more. But we'll see. We'll see who authored that, or sponsored it, whatever the verbiage is for how they do these things. But anyway, we'll see. I mean, it's a big thing. We want our Second Amendment restored back to its full extent, but we understand that this is an uphill battle because we're going against major powers here. And I think the ultimate goal for this government, or this organization that is our government, I think their main goal is to disarm us. And that's just, I'm going to be blunt about it, because I feel like that's where they want it to go. There is going to be this tug of war between winning some battles and losing some battles for the 2A, but I think ultimately they're trying to just to do away with it. Just like, they're trying to redefine the 1A right now with all the free speech versus hate speech stuff. And we can get into that, in a different episode for sure. But let's move on to, you want to move on to the stabbing that happened at the football game between the two students.
Yeah, so I think what the audience is going to quickly learn here, they'll be like, "Oh, that's a Kawa topic, or that's a Lane topic." I've kind of been enamored, if you will, between this Frisco, Texas track meet stabbing, um, and the Karen Reed trial, and I'll save that for later because I'll give you some time to. I know you, Kyle, and I know if you dig for about 20 minutes, you'll just laugh at that case. But this case specifically, just another case, another example of an example of the racial tensions that I think our country has right now. I'll provide a probably 30-second rundown of this, and there's more details, but what I'll say is track meet, school sponsored event, by a school district, track meet area, stadium, whatever you want to call it. Don't quote me on the stadium. It's a track with two sets of bleachers on each side, so forth and so on. One kid goes and sits under a tent of another team. One kid takes it upon himself to tell the kid, "Get up, get out of our tent," which, if you think back when we were 16 to 17-year-old young men, or young boys, if you were in high school, is reflective of testosterone and emotional rage of a little teenage boy telling one to get out. The other one says, "I'm not moving." One says, move, pushes his bag or pushes him or grabs him. I don't know. We'll see when the case comes out. And the kid says, "Touch me again," which I say that based on all the reporting and the witness statements that have been released to the public. And I think Austin pushes or touches the African-American kid, and then the kid brings out a knife from his backpack and stabs the guy of a puncture wound to the chest, which I believe hit his heart, and the kid died.
That was Carmelo Anthony and stabbing Austin
Metcalf. Yeah. So Carmelo he doesn't run. He gets away from the area. I'm sure there's mass chaos. Cops, all the reports show that the cops said, "Hey, I got a suspect that looks like the suspect," and an individual that looks like the suspect. Carmelo tells the cop, "I don't look like it. I am the person that stabbed the guy." So I'll get past. I'm sure
he just came clean. He didn't try to.
Yeah. He told the cop, he's like, "I'm the guy that did it." And the cop, arrested him. And then in the police, the arresting officer's statement, he says that, Carmelo stated, like, could this be considered self-defense or whatever. So we'll jump forward. I think what's going to happen is, as the trial moves forward, we'll get more details. What I will say is this. I've been on social media and I've been listening to a bunch of lives and conjecture, if you will, and it's very easy. I would say predominantly the majority, the Caucasian people are outraged and think that this young boy should go to jail for life, murder one, whatever. And all of the African Americans on the topic are saying he was bullied, he was picked on, the white kid should have minded his business or gotten a teacher. And deserves to get off on self-defense. However, it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of isms and the racial dynamics on this case. But what I would offer is, and then I'll kind of kick it to you for your thoughts, is that between the day he was arrested, initial bond, I think, was set at $1 million, if I can remember correctly. And then bond reduction hearing was conducted. A predominant lawyer out of Dallas, Texas was hired. He got the bond reduced to $200,000 or $250,000, $250,000, which first time offender X, Y, and Z. What I will say is the percentage of the reduction was uncharacteristic for the state of Texas for state law, and take that for what it is. I won't comment on the judge, the background, or that judge's record, but I would implore people to go check that out. He gets put on house arrest. And over 3 or 4 weeks go by, and there's a bunch of different aspects you can take on this case, but we don't have enough time to cover it all tonight. Is that he is released on bond, put under house arrest, allowed to graduate with his diploma. Doesn't walk the stage, obviously, it's not safe, and is pending trial or an indictment.
But But what
And
just came out recently about
that's what I
that
was
though?
about to say. The
Okay.
DA just charged him formally as an adult with murder one.
Uh,
What does that tell me? It tells me a few things, and I'm going to try to stop babbling here, Kawa.
no, you're good.
Um,
I didn't
that
know
tells
any
me
of
a
this,
few
by the
things.
way. So this is news
Well,
to
yeah,
me.
and it's right near you, right? It's a couple hours up the road. Well, it's
Yeah.
Texas, so Dallas is what 5-6 hours. I don't. It's not near you, but
Yeah,
it's
but the
close enough.
details that you're giving me are good because I didn't know these details, and I'm sure some of these people listening didn't know these details.
Yeah, and I'm being. I would argue to you, it's details you're not following it. To people that followed this case, I'm missing out on a lot of stuff
Okay.
that I would love to kind of visit because I'm kind of nerded out on this. But the what I would offer is that the DA just announced that they're going to charge him with murder one and as an adult. That tells me a few things. Despite hearing, most African Americans saying it's going to be self-defense, he'll get off. Most Caucasians say this is ridiculous. No kid should pay the price of life for, grabbing someone by the arm or pushing them or whatever. I mean, everything from they were bullying him to the twin brothers jumped him to everything has come out to try to justify him stabbing them. And we won't get into offensive and defensive wounds with a knife. However, the fact that the DA waited a month, meaning they did interviews, they took statements, they have video, multiple aspects of evidence or a conglomeration of evidence was collected. And the fact that the formal charge hasn't come out until now, 3 or 4 weeks later, tells you a few things. One, I think it tells you the DA was really trying to exercise some what we call in the military tactical patience in evaluating the evidence to make sure before announcing the charge that the evidence surmounted to the elements of the appropriate charge. Meaning, for murder one, there's some intent there. There is your actions could not be considered in self-defense based on your positioning, the assailant's positioning, or what you would consider to be. In this case, now that it's going to be considered murder one, will be the victim. And when you consider all of that and the fact that they waited a month, it tells me that the DA wanted to make sure they got this right. And now this kid is going to face murder one as an adult in the state of Texas, which, state of Texas doesn't really joke around with murder charges. So if convicted of murder one or even manslaughter, that young man's life has changed. The family has changed forever. And then obviously Austin Metcalf is no longer with us, which is a shame. I'll tell you this, the first element of this case that I couldn't get past, my brain couldn't see beyond it, was why is a kid at a football game there with a knife?
Right.
And then there's multiple defenses of, well, how long was the knife? Because in state of Texas, anything longer than 4 inches. To me, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a school zone, school sponsored event. No weapon should be there.
Right.
If you're a kid and your first thought is touch me and see what happens, and you bring out a knife, and I can make the case that language is provocative in nature to begin with, and escalatory, if you will. The whole case, I think sadly to say, I think this Carmelo kid is facing an uphill battle. And the thing with self-defense cases, when you claim self-defense as a defense, you put the onus on the defense team just as much as the prosecution team. What I mean by that is the prosecution in America with our court system typically has to prove with beyond a reasonable doubt that you convicted that crime. And the jury has to be convinced of that via the evidence or circumstantial evidence. On the defense side, when it's self-defense, and I'm done after this, Kyle, on the defense side, when you say self-defense, you have to present information that proves it was in the act of self-defense. So the onus is not just on the prosecution. And the reason I think that's going to be a key component here is because typically defendants do not want to take the stand because they have their Fifth Amendment to not persecute themselves or anything or perjure themselves, or even, they have a right to remain silent. And I just think, and I'm not a lawyer, guys, I did 21 years in the Army, but I think that is going to be the hang up on whether they put him on the stand or not, to dig into or maybe articulate and illustrate the fear and or what he was thinking when he reacted.
Well, I have a few things to say. I mean, one, we want to call them kids, but at the same time, 17, I mean, you're pretty much an adult.
Only in America is a 17-year-old a kid.
Right. That's true. No, that's a very good point, because in most countries, once you're 16, you're considered an adult. And then there's obviously some countries with weird laws, like 21, 22. But I think these are, yes, they're kids to us because we're older. We've been there and done that, so we can call them kids easily. But I think the actions that were happening were the actions of an adult. Like your brain is pretty much fully developed, not maybe by 17, because I'm not a scientist or a doctor, what do I know? But I feel like by 17, you have the cognitive thought ability to decide right from wrong and understand the circumstances of your decisions, whether they're good or bad, and those secondary tertiary effects. And for a kid to bring a knife to a school function is one, tells me that there is a certain mindset in this kid where he feels like it's okay to do that. And that is not, to me, not a healthy, not a healthy mental state. If you think that you have to carry a knife around as a 17-year-old to a school event, then there's something else that you are prioritizing over just being a 17-year-old that goes to a school event. And I don't know what his personal life was like and why he felt the need to carry a knife. But let's say he carried the knife, but what compelled him to pull that knife out? Is it the fact that he just had it and so he could do it, so he did it? Or is it he felt like I need to escalate force or escalate my actions to a place where I go consciously grab the knife out of the bag, come back, and then proceed to stab Austin Metcalf in the chest, killing him. And so, I mean, I feel like, this kid is probably going to get what he deserves, because he could have easily decided not to grab that knife. He could have easily decided not to take that knife in the first place. But also, he decided consciously to strike that fatal blow into Austin Metcalf's chest, which, like you said, probably struck his heart, killing him very, very soon after that. No chance of saving this kid. And now he can play the victim card all he wants, but I think this kid's going to go to jail or maybe get the death sentence, the death penalty. And yes, his life is going to be wasted, but unfortunately, we have to kind of stick to the laws, and we can debate laws and the extent of laws. But in this case, if that's the law, then he broke it, and he needs to obviously pay for that, whatever that sentence is. And I get where his family's going to come from and everybody who is on his side, because we don't want to see another kid die or go to jail for life, because we already lost one life and it doesn't help us to lose two. But in this case, he did something that he can't come back from, Lane. That's just what I think. He can't come back from this.
Yeah, and I think obviously, as you said that, it made me realize that like this, barring the racial tensions in our country right now, I would tell you the bigger part here is the parenting epidemic we have.
Yeah.
I just think, you put yourself on both sides of the equation, right? Okay, I lost my son. I think how I would be and how I would react would be on par with most parents out there, distraught, disbelief, X, Y, and Z. But if my son was the one who did this, I think, and I'm trying to be brutally honest here, I think my first comments to him what were you thinking? And secondly, you took this too far. And then I would probably, lastly, go and try to hire the best lawyer I could to minimize those charges. Not meaning I condone the behavior or I condone what he did, but at the end of the day, he is my son. And that's the challenging part, where I see parents and people defending these actions. It's like, where have we gotten to a point where when a police officer, a teacher, or an authority figure within a child's life comes to the parents and says, hey, your child has done this, or we're having issues with their child. I can't tell you how many videos, and not a few, a lot, like thousands, if not millions, of parents reacting, of screaming at the teacher, screaming at the principal, screaming at cops, policemen, state troopers, of, he probably didn't do that. What did my son do? And not to compare, because I know we're in a different world now, but when I was a kid, if a cop had to talk to my parents, by default, the details didn't matter. I was in trouble because a cop was talking to them about me. I was associated with something that required cops to be involved, or my teacher or the principal or the dean of students, because we had a dean who pretty much had the paddle on us in Louisiana. If they're calling my dad to say we're either going to whip him or he's going to get suspended for 3 days, I was already in trouble. The result didn't matter what happened at school. I was going to be in trouble. And the point I think that my dad was trying to carry through to me was respect authority. Authority is authority. You being right or wrong in that moment is kind of irrelevant. There are other times and places and people to involve if you're in fact right, to then represent your position and what you did or didn't do in that scenario. So we don't have enough time to keep going into this, but I think I would appreciate your feedback on parenting, because there's no manual on it. There's no book that tells you how to be a good parent. But I think for myself, I just simply tell my kids, you're a child, they're an adult. Short of something immoral, unethical, or puts you in harm or danger, you just do what you're told in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, parenting definitely is a factor here. We don't know what kind of parenting, or again, we don't know what went on inside his house. But from what I've read so far, I feel like he was in a not like in a unhealthy, living condition where maybe
Nice
it was,
suburbs, married mom and dad,
I mean,
good
he's got it.
grades.
I mean, if we're being honest, he's got it better than most black kids in America.
Technically, he has it better than the guy that was killed. Like the guy that was killed, split household.
Okay.
Dad
So
was a blue
he
collar
has
worker.
it better than most white kids in America.
Right now, especially in that Frisco, Texas area.
I mean, Frisco's a nice area. I got friends
It
that
is.
live there,
Yeah, yeah.
and so obviously this kid, it's not like he came from the ghetto. He didn't come from the slums. He didn't, grow up in this life of criminal mischief, but he did make.
By the way, he was originally from Louisiana.
Oh, that'll tell you something, because guess where Lane's from.
He's originally from Louisiana, relocated to Texas. I want to say just post-COVID or pre-COVID.
Okay, well, something in that Louisiana water. But I mean, so I guess we'll see that, right? Because I mean, what's the latest on this case, Lane?
I think he's going to get charged, or he has been charged as an adult with murder one. And I'd be interested to see if they're going to wait on an indictment with a grand jury, or they're just going to move to trial with the DA. I don't know Texas law specifically. I haven't looked it up. But I've heard a lot of people saying, well, he hasn't been indicted yet. Not every case requires a grand jury to indict you to go to trial. So I'm sure some lawyers or some legal professionals within your following or whatnot may validate or invalidate that I'm an idiot, or I am on to some kind of right track here to see how this kind of formulates. But I'd love to circle back around when this case happens to see, the details that none of us have at this point, short of what's been released.
Well, I definitely want to stay up to date on this case too, because I didn't know some of the details. I just thought it was a kid stabbed another kid. One's black, one's white, and then you start to develop your own perceptions because you don't know all the facts. But so we definitely appreciate all the info on that case, and we'll stay tuned, see how it goes. I mean, I feel like we know where it's kind of headed, but who knows? Our criminal system is definitely broke, a topic within its own. And maybe we'll cover that one day as well. But I say we wrap it up for this one, Lane. I mean,
Yeah.
This was a good first episode. We try to give you guys, obviously what the podcast is going to be about, and then a little bit of story behind myself and Lane and our friendship. And then obviously we talked about a couple hot tickets right now. One with the Constitution, and then obviously one in this case of the stabbing between these kids. And that's the kind of stuff that we want to talk about, because as Americans, this affects us whether we believe it at the moment or not. Like these kind of cases is where if it was a gun, for example, that Austin Metcalf got shot with, then you'd have all of the gun control people saying, see, look at school shootings, guns on campus, and, just guns in general, and, all that jazz, right? So, but now we have a knife that's been used, and I don't hear the gun control people speaking up about a knife, because if they're arguing by principles, then we should start banning some knives too, and we should start having some knife control, right? But because it's guns, because it's not a gun, they're not going to touch it, because for them it's a very narrow kind of minded outlook towards the Second Amendment, not the principles of the Second Amendment, which is to protect yourself. The Second Amendment says the right to bear arms. That could mean a lot of things. Swords back in the day, I mean, bows and arrows, it could mean flamethrowers. I mean, it doesn't matter. But so anyway, that goes back to the Second Amendment and why I think principles over politics always wins. But I think that's it for this episode, guys. We definitely appreciate you guys for tuning in. Um, I hope you enjoyed obviously the episode. And then, we don't quite know the frequency of these episodes just yet because of our busy traveling schedule. Hence why, again, I'm in a hotel room. Lane's at home, but next time Lane's going to be in a hotel room and I'll be at home. Who knows?
We're going to shoot for weekly. We'll see.
But we're going to shoot for weekly because we named it the Weekly Debrief, and we want to hold ourselves accountable to that kind of frequency. But subscribe to the podcast, guys. This is a fresh start for us. I tried to do this a while back with another podcast, but didn't have the time and bandwidth. Now I have the time and bandwidth to do this and everything that I need, even on the road. So we're happy to get it going. But subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. We're going to be on Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Music, whatever it's called now, and all the other kind of big major platforms. And if there's a platform that you don't find us on, then let us know and we'll try to find a way to get onto that platform as well. Otherwise, we would love to hear your feedback in, the comment section here. Tell us what you think. Give us ideas on what you guys want us to talk about. Put it in the suggestion box or whatever, and we'll kind of add it to our queue. Or if it's like time sensitive, we'll move it up and we'll talk about it. But we would love to hear from you guys as well. Lane, you got anything? Last words?
Yeah, man. Stay moving. Take care of your people. Love on your people. Prioritize your friendships. And God bless. Hopefully, with every week, we have another week to go. So looking forward to interacting and meeting with people. And hopefully, whether it be through guest or potential live episodes, to get to know people, connect with people, and hopefully educate myself and broaden my horizons and aperture in which I see the world from other people's opinions. Thank you much. Good night.
Yeah, and just really quick, yep, we're trying to go live at some point with this, guys. We're also trying to get into a studio and be co-located with this. So as the podcast continues, the presentation of it, I should say, will also improve, and hopefully one day we're live in a studio, with guests. So that's it from us. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.